In the heart of Lagos, among the chaotic traffic, the bright billboards, and the loud voices of the bustling crowd, there lies Elegba Street, a place rich in culture, history, and vibrant personalities. The street is home to countless traders, artists, and craftsmen who, despite their different trades, share a common thread: the desire to be seen, to be noticed, and to make a mark in a city that constantly moves forward. But on this particular street, one man stands out, not because of his success, but because of his difference. Kofi is a young tailor who runs his shop in a small, weathered building tucked between a high-end boutique and a row of street vendors, selling fruits and snacks. His shop is modest, with peeling paint on the walls, a cluttered workbench filled with colorful fabrics, and a single bulb that flickers above his head as he works late into the night. Despite the humble surroundings, there's something unmistakably unique about Kofi's creations. His clothes are bold, unorthodox, and scream of African pride, reflecting a modern twist on traditional patterns, all stitched with a painstakingly meticulous touch. However, Kofi's designs, though full of vibrancy and life, are far from what the average Lagosian would expect from a tailor. His choices of fabrics, bright yellows, oranges, purples, and greens, are a stark contrast to the more subdued, westernized cuts and styles that dominate the market. He doesn't just make clothes, he creates pieces of art that speak to the soul. His inspiration comes from the streets, the culture, and the rich African heritage that defines Lagos itself. But instead of receiving admiration, Kofi is often met with skepticism and mockery. In a city where fashion is often dictated by trends and labels, Kofi is considered a misfit. People laugh at his eccentric designs. "Who would wear something like that?" they say. "It's too loud, too bold for Lagos." The whispers reach his ears as he walks the narrow streets, often causing him to retreat further into his shop, where his creativity flows unhindered by the world outside. But there is something in the air of Elegba Street that keeps him going, a belief that his work has a purpose beyond just dressing people. Kofi is more than just a tailor. He is a man with a vision. His clothes are more than fabric and thread. They are a representation of the struggles, the pride, and the resilience of the African spirit. His customers, though few, are loyal. Most are young men and women from the nearby neighborhoods who are tired of the monotony of the mainstream clothing stores. They are drawn to Kofi's shop not just for the clothes, but for the sense of identity they feel when they wear his designs. There is a sense of power, of pride, that comes with wearing something so unapologetically African. One such loyal customer is Chinonso, a popular radio host in Lagos, known for her progressive views and her bold fashion choices. She first visited Kofi's shop after hearing whispers about his unique creations, and from that moment on, she became one of his most vocal supporters. Chinonso had grown tired of the cookie-cutter designs that lacked soul. She was looking for something that spoke to her, something that reflected the deep connection she had with her roots. When she wore one of Kofi's bright embroidered dresses on air, the reaction was electric. Her followers flooded social media with compliments, calling the dress a statement and a reflection of true African beauty. For Kofi, it was a breakthrough, a moment of validation. It was proof that there was a place for his creations in Lagos, even if it was a small one. But even with this small victory, Kofi's path is not without challenges. The city is fast-paced, and trends change as quickly as the seasons. To survive, Kofi needs more than just a few loyal customers. He needs recognition, influence, and a way to prove to the world that his designs are not just a passing trend, but a testament to the richness of African culture. One day, after another long day of stitching, cutting, and sewing, Kofi sits in his shop staring at a new piece he's created, a jacket made from deep maroon fabric with intricate geometric patterns running through it. He can already picture the pride on his client's face when they wear it. But just as he is about to finish the jacket, his thoughts drift. He wonders if his work will ever be enough to make him stand out in a city full of copycats. He wonders if anyone will truly see the depth of his designs, or if he will always remain the misfit in a world that values conformity over creativity. As he ponders these questions, the noise from the street outside grows louder, as if the city itself is reminding him of the world that exists beyond his shop. He opens the door and steps outside, his gaze lingering on the bright lights of the neighboring boutiques, their windows filled with the latest trends. He can't help but feel like he's fighting an uphill battle. But in his heart, Kofi knows one thing for certain: he will never compromise his vision, no matter how much the world around him demands it. In the quiet of his shop, Kofi sits back down, picking up his needle and thread once again. With each stitch, he weaves not just fabric but a piece of his soul. His designs may be dismissed now, but he believes deep down that one day, the world will see them for what they truly are: a revolution of style, culture, and self-expression. And thus the story of Kofi, the misfit tailor of Elegba Street, begins. A story not just of fashion, but of resilience, pride, and the power of staying. Be true to oneself. The months after Kofi's breakthrough with Chinonso's media exposure passed quickly. With his name now whispered in the circles of Lagos's most influential, the quiet tailor from Elegba Street was starting to emerge from the shadows of obscurity. The attention that Kofi had longed for was now on him, but it wasn't just the praise that fueled him. It was the sense of purpose that grew stronger each day. Kofi's designs, once considered eccentric and out of place, now carried a sense of dignity. They were no longer just clothes, they were a statement of pride in African identity. Kofi's little shop had become a beacon for the bold and the adventurous. Young people flocked from all corners of the city to see the man who was redefining what it meant to be stylish in Lagos. His designs were like a breath of fresh air, blowing through the stale corridors of the mainstream fashion industry. He refused to follow trends. Instead, he created his own. His inspiration came from everything: the rich history of African kingdoms, the vibrant markets of Lagos, the rhythmic sounds of Afrobeat, and the vivid landscapes of his home. Every stitch Kofi made told a story. He used traditional fabrics like Ankara and Kente to create pieces that were not only beautiful but also meaningful. He mixed modern cuts with traditional designs, creating something that was both contemporary and timeless. He didn't just make clothing, he made cultural statements. His work spoke of Africa's strength, its beauty, and its resilience in the face of centuries of adversity. The transformation didn't stop at Kofi's designs. It also resonated with his clients. The young people who wore his clothes didn't just feel fashionable. They felt empowered. For many, wearing Kofi's creations was an act of defiance against the westernized standards of beauty that Lagos had come to worship. In a city where people often felt pressured to dress in ways that conformed to global trends, Kofi's creations were a reminder that African culture was not just something to be proud of, but something to be celebrated. One of his most loyal customers, Chinonso, continued to champion his work. She wore his designs on air, on social media, and at high-profile events. But it wasn't just her fame that helped elevate Kofi. It was her belief in his art. Chinonso didn't wear his clothes because they were trendy. She wore them because they spoke to her. They were a reflection of her own identity, of the African woman she was proud to be. Soon, Kofi's work began to catch the eye of other prominent figures in Lagos, including Nia, a fashion magazine editor known for her sharp eye and cutting critiques. Nia had been following Kofi's work for months, intrigued by the boldness of his designs and the confidence of his customers. When she visited his shop for the first time, she was taken aback. There, amidst the clutter of fabric, thread, and mannequins, Kofi had created something that was larger than fashion. It was an experience. "Kofi, you're not just a tailor, you're a cultural architect," Nia said to him, her eyes scanning his latest collection, a mix of flowing gowns and tailored suits that combined traditional African prints with sleek, modern cuts. Kofi laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm just a man with a needle and thread." "No," she corrected him. "You are a man with a vision, and that vision is one that can change the fashion world." Nia published an article about Kofi in her magazine, calling him the Rebel, Tailor of Elegba Street, and showcasing his latest collection in a full spread. The article was a game-changer. It wasn't just the public recognition that Kofi had been seeking, it was the way people began to look at fashion differently. They no longer saw clothes as just fabric. They saw them as a form of personal expression, a way to connect to one's roots, and a way to tell a story. But even as his fame grew, Kofi knew that recognition was a double-edged sword. He started receiving requests from designers, both local and international, to collaborate. The offers were tempting, but Kofi was wary. He had spent too long in the shadows, fighting for his voice to be heard, to allow his work to be diluted or commercialized. He didn't want to be another designer, mass-producing clothing for the masses. He wanted to stay true to himself, to the essence of African culture, to the people who believed in him when he had nothing. However, with each passing day, the pressure mounted. Kofi's shop was now more than just a local favorite. It was a destination. Celebrities began to wear. His designs and the media took notice. His work was featured on billboards across Lagos. His name spread from one fashion show to the next, and soon he was invited to showcase his collection in international fashion capitals. But through it all, Kofi never lost sight of why he started. Because he wanted to make clothes that mattered, clothes that resonated with the people of his community. And though his success was growing, his fears were also growing. The question that lingered in his mind, even as his designs graced the cover of fashion magazines, was simple. Could he stay true to his vision as the world watched? The rise of Kofi, the Tailor of Elegba Street, had only just begun. But already the path ahead was fraught with challenges, temptations to commercialize, pressures to conform, and doubts about whether his designs would continue to speak to the people who had once supported him. In the midst of this whirlwind, Kofi remained grounded in the belief that style was not just about the clothes, it was about the culture, the spirit, and the soul behind them. He knew that he had something unique, something irreplaceable. He could feel it in every stitch, in every fabric, in every piece of cloth that passed through his hands. True style wasn't something that could be copied. It was something that came from the heart, and so Kofi's legend grew, not just because of his designs, but because of his unwavering commitment to something greater than himself. He was a tailor, yes, but more importantly, he was a storyteller, a messenger of culture, of pride, and of the soul of Lagos. The days following Kofi's meteoric rise were filled with excitement and new opportunities. His shop on Elegba Street had become a landmark of sorts, and Lagos itself felt like a different city, a city where creativity was no longer stifled by the weight of tradition and expectation. Yet, with success came the inevitable, unspoken threat: envy. Kofi had always known the challenges that came with fame, how it could attract both admiration and resentment, but nothing could prepare him for the betrayal that would soon come, from the very place he had considered home. It started with small things: whispers on the street, customers who had once been his loyal supporters, now talking behind his back. He noticed a shift in the way people viewed him, not just as Kofi, the tailor, but as Kofi, the success story. While some admired his journey, others resented it. People who had once admired his bold designs now muttered about how he had sold out, how his work had lost its authenticity in the face of fame. But the true betrayal came from a source that Kofi least expected. One evening, as the sun dipped, beneath the horizon, casting a warm glow over the street, Kofi closed up his shop for the day. As he locked the door, his friend and longtime assistant, Chijioke, appeared from behind a corner, his face unreadable. "Kofi, we need to talk," Chijioke said, his voice low and strained. Kofi raised an eyebrow, stepping back into his shop. "What's wrong?" Chijioke hesitated before speaking, his words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. "I've seen something that I need to show you." Confused, Kofi followed Chijioke down the narrow alley that led to the back of the shop, where they came across a small, run-down boutique. There, plastered on the walls of the shop, were several designs that Kofi had created, his signature patterns, his bold use of color, his unique cuts, all reproduced almost identically. The sign on the shop read, "Tariq Designs, bold and beautiful." Kofi felt the ground beneath him shake. Tariq was one of the up-and-coming designers in Lagos, someone Kofi had met at several industry events. A promising young man with a sharp eye for fashion, Tariq had once praised Kofi's work, calling it revolutionary. Kofi had even offered to mentor him, seeing in Tariq a younger version of himself. But now, as he looked at the imitated designs, he realized the painful truth. Tariq had stolen his ideas. "Is this a joke, Chijioke?" Kofi asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "How could he do this?" "I don't know," Chijioke replied, "but I've seen him around, studying your work closely. I thought it was just admiration. But now, this." Kofi stood frozen, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger and sadness. He had been betrayed by someone he had taken under his wing, someone he had trusted. But what hurt the most was the realization that his work, his soul, had been copied without his permission. What was once uniquely his had now been taken and turned into a cheap imitation. Later that night, as Kofi sat in his shop, alone with his thoughts, he felt a deep sense of loss. He had worked tirelessly to carve a space for himself in a world that often didn't value authenticity, to fight for a style that was born from the heart of Africa. But now, it seemed that the very thing he feared had come to pass. His designs, his story, were being sold to the highest bidder. The next day, Kofi went to confront Tariq. He found him at a fashion showroom surrounded by sleek models and flashing cameras. When Tariq saw Kofi, a look of discomfort crossed his face, but he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Kofi," Tariq greeted him, extending a hand. "I've been meaning to talk to you about—" "No more talking," Kofi interrupted. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. "You took my designs. You stole from me." Tariq's smile faltered, and for a moment Kofi saw the young designer's facade crack. He took a step back, avoiding Kofi's gaze. "Kofi, I didn't think you'd mind. You know how the industry works. People take inspiration, and sometimes they borrow ideas." Kofi's fists clenched at his sides. "Inspiration. You copied everything. You took my work, my soul, and sold it to the highest bidder. I trusted you." Tariq lowered his head, shame flooding his face. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Kofi. I thought if I could just make it, if I could just get my foot in the door, I'd be able to prove myself." Kofi took a deep breath, fighting back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. "You don't get to prove yourself by taking someone else's soul." But even as the words left his mouth, Kofi knew that the betrayal went deeper than just his designs. It went to the very core of what he had been building. For a moment, the dream he had worked so hard to create felt like it was slipping through his fingers. Had the world of fashion always been this cutthroat? Was there no room for genuine creativity in a city that thrived on copying and imitation? As he left Tariq's showroom, Kofi made a decision. He could have fought back, filed a lawsuit, and sought to regain what was his. But that wouldn't change the truth. He had built something that couldn't be stolen. True style, true artistry, came from within. It wasn't about copying designs or trends. It was about vision, about soul, about understanding what it meant to be African in a world that often forgot. The betrayal of Elegba Street had hurt, but it had also sparked something. Within Kofi, he realized that the most important part of his work was not the fabric or the cut, but the heart of it. And no one, no matter how much they copied, could take that from him. Kofi walked back to his small shop on Elegba Street, the weight of betrayal heavy on his chest. He had faced many challenges throughout his life, but this felt different. Tariq's betrayal had cut deeper than anything before. Not only had his designs been stolen, but his trust had been shattered. His vision, which he had worked so hard to create, had been tainted. As he sat alone in his shop later that evening, surrounded by unfinished designs, Kofi found himself at a crossroads. The allure of success had been intoxicating, but now it felt like a distant memory, swallowed by the anger and sadness that clouded his mind. His once clear vision now seemed clouded, as if the weight of expectations, both his own and those of the world, was suffocating him. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Shinonso, his most loyal client, who had become not only a supporter of his work but also a friend. She entered with a concerned look on her face, her eyes scanning the room before resting on Kofi. "Kofi, what's wrong?" she asked gently, her voice laced with worry. Kofi looked up at her, forcing a smile. "It's nothing, just some problems with a business partner." Chinonso wasn't convinced. She had seen the fire in Kofi's eyes before, the passion that drove him, and she knew something was wrong. "You don't look like someone who's just having a business problem, Kofi," she said, sitting across from him. "What happened?" With a deep breath, Kofi told her everything. How Tariq had stolen his designs, how the trust he had placed in him had been betrayed, how his world now felt like it was unraveling. As Kofi spoke, Chinonso listened intently, never interrupting, but her face grew increasingly serious. "You know, Kofi," Chinonso said after a long pause, "people are going to try to take what you've built. It's the nature of success. But you have something no one can steal from you." Kofi frowned. "What's that?" "Your soul." Chinonso's eyes sparkled with certainty. "What makes your designs so special isn't the fabric or the pattern. It's the soul you put into them. It's your heart. No one can copy that. Not Tariq, not anyone." Kofi sat back in his chair, her words sinking in like a slow, steady river. He had been so focused on the betrayal that he had forgotten the most important truth. His designs were a reflection of who he was, his identity, his culture, and no one could take that away. "But what do I do now?" Kofi asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "How do I move forward after this?" Chinonso smiled, standing up and walking over to the pile of designs that Kofi had been working on. "You keep going, Kofi. You keep creating. You take this pain, this betrayal, and you turn it into something greater. Let it fuel your art. Show the world that no one can break you." She picked up one of his designs, a bold, intricate jacket, made from deep blue Ankara fabric, embroidered with silver thread in the shape of traditional African symbols. "This right here, this is you. This is your heart." Kofi stared at the jacket, a surge of inspiration rising within him. For the first time since the betrayal, he felt something stir deep inside him, a new sense of purpose. Chinonso was right. He couldn't let this setback define him. He wouldn't let it. The next day, Kofi set to work with a renewed passion. He locked himself in his shop, focusing solely on his craft. The betrayal that had once clouded his thoughts now became fuel for his creativity. He poured his heart and soul into every piece he made, creating designs that were even bolder, even more personal than before. Kofi's work began to evolve, and with it, his perspective. No longer was he simply creating for the sake of recognition. Now, he was creating for himself, for his culture, and for the people who believed in him. He poured his pain into his designs, weaving the emotions of betrayal, resilience, and defiance into every thread. His new collection was unlike anything he had ever made before. He incorporated not only traditional African patterns but also elements of personal symbolism, stories of his own life, the struggles he had faced, and the strength he had found within himself. It was a celebration of who he was, not just as a designer, but as an African man who had fought to make his mark in a world that often overlooked him. Word of Kofi's new collection quickly spread throughout Lagos. People who had once doubted him now spoke of him in awe. He had gone from being a misfit tailor to a visionary. His work was not just fashion, it was art, it was storytelling, and it resonated with everyone who had ever faced adversity. The day Kofi unveiled his new collection, a massive crowd gathered outside his shop, eager to see what he had created. His designs were displayed on mannequins, vibrant and bold, capturing the essence of African culture in every stitch. The models who wore his clothes walked with a sense of pride, each step a reminder that style wasn't just about looking good, it was about feeling good, about embracing who you were, and about telling your own story. Chinonso stood by his side, her smile radiant as she watched the reaction of the crowd. "You did it, Kofi." Kofi's eyes glistened with pride. "No, we did it, Chinonso. This is just the beginning." And with that, Kofi realized something profound. Success wasn't about the recognition or the money. It was about staying true to yourself. His designs were no longer just garments. They were a statement of identity, a testament to the resilience of his people, and a reminder that true style came from within. No one could steal that. With the unveiling of Kofi's new collection, the atmosphere on Elegba Street had changed. The buzz around his designs was unlike anything he had experienced before. Kofi's tailoring house was no longer just a shop. It had become a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of a culture that refused to be forgotten. People from all corners of Lagos gathered to admire his bold, vibrant designs, each piece telling a story of survival, strength, and African pride. The media had caught wind of Kofi's newfound success, and soon enough, interviews, features, and magazine covers began to follow. But Kofi remained grounded, focused on his work, and determined not to let the distractions of fame cloud his true purpose. He had been betrayed, yes, but it had only served to ignite a deeper passion for the art of tailoring that came from within, his soul. Now, he was ready to show the world what true style meant. One sunny afternoon, as Kofi was finishing a custom design for a client, a familiar face walked into the shop. It was Tariq, the designer who had once stolen his creations. Kofi felt a wave of anger rise within him, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had learned that true strength came from controlling his emotions, not letting them control him. Tariq hesitated before speaking, his eyes shifting nervously. "Kofi," he began, his voice almost a whisper. "I came to apologize. I know I hurt you, and I regret what I did." Kofi didn't speak immediately. He stared at Tariq, who was no longer the confident, up-and-coming designer he had once admired. Instead, there was a weariness in his eyes, an emptiness that spoke of the consequences of his own actions. Tariq had tried to ride on the coattails of Kofi's success, but now he was paying the price. "You can't steal someone's soul, Tariq," Kofi finally said, his voice calm but firm. "You can steal ideas, you can take designs, but the truth is, you'll never have what I have. I don't design because of fame. I design because it's a part of who I am. You can never replicate that." Tariq looked down, a deep sigh escaping him. "I didn't understand that at the time. I thought success was about being the best. I thought I could get there by copying you, by taking what you built. But now, I see that I was wrong. I lost myself in the process." Kofi's eyes softened, the anger in him dissipating. "You'll never be truly successful until you find yourself, Tariq. Style is more than just clothes. It's who you are, and until you own that, you'll always be chasing something that's not yours." Tariq nodded slowly, his expression pained. "Thank you, Kofi." Kofi watched him leave the shop, his footsteps heavier than when he had first entered. Tariq had been a reminder of the consequences of losing one's integrity, but Kofi couldn't hold on to resentment forever. He had learned that letting go of the past was part of moving forward. Meanwhile, word of Kofi's collection had spread far beyond Lagos. International buyers, high-end boutiques, and even celebrities started to take notice. His designs were no longer just a local phenomenon. They were becoming a global sensation. But Kofi never lost sight of his roots. Each piece he created was still a love letter to his African heritage, a reflection of his journey, and an expression of his soul. One day, as Kofi prepared for another major fashion showcase, Chinonso came to visit him at his shop. The energy in the room was palpable, with models rehearsing in the background and the hum of creativity filling the air. "Kofi," Chinonso began, her voice brimming with excitement. "I've been hearing rumors from the high fashion world. They're saying that you might be the next big name in global fashion. The best designers from Paris, Milan, they're all talking about you." Kofi smiled, but there was a sense of humility in his expression. "It's not about the title, Chinonso. It's about the work. I'm just creating what feels right for me." Chinonso raised an eyebrow. "Don't get me wrong, your work is phenomenal. But you've changed, Kofi. You've gone from being a misfit to someone who is shaping the future of fashion. You're redefining what it means to be a designer, not just in Lagos, but in the world." Kofi paused for a moment, reflecting on how far he had come. He had been that misfit, an outsider in the fashion world, struggling to make his mark. But now, he was being recognized not just for his designs, but for the message behind them. "I didn't set out to be famous," Kofi said softly. "I just wanted to show people that true style comes from the heart, not the trends. I wanted to remind them of who they are." Just as Kofi spoke those words, the door to the shop opened, and a tall, well-dressed man walked in, his presence commanding attention. He was accompanied by a group of well-dressed assistants and business partners. Kofi's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the man immediately. Luca Giordano, the renowned Italian fashion mogul, had just stepped into his shop. Luca was one of the most influential figures in global fashion, a man who had turned several designers into household names. "Mr. Kofi," Luca said, his voice rich with authority. "I've heard a lot about your work. It's unlike anything I've seen. You have the kind of vision that the fashion world has been waiting for." Kofi stood up, his confidence unshaken. "I appreciate the kind words, Mr. Giordano, but I design with my culture in mind. My work will always be rooted in Africa." Luca nodded, smiling with understanding. "I respect that, and that's why I'm here. I believe your designs have the potential to transcend borders, to speak to people all over the world. I want to collaborate with you, Kofi. Together, we can take your work to places it's never been before." For a moment, Kofi was taken aback. This was the opportunity he had dreamed of, the chance to bring African fashion to a global stage. But in that instant, he realized that no matter where his designs took him, his integrity would remain unchanged. He had created something powerful, something that couldn't be diluted or watered down. "I'll work with you," Kofi said, his voice firm. "But on one condition. I'm not just a designer, I'm a storyteller. My work will always be authentic, and it will always carry the spirit of Africa with it." Luca smiled, extending his hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And with that handshake, Kofi knew he had reached the pinnacle of his journey. It was no longer about being the best in Lagos, or even the best in Africa. It was about staying true to his roots while conquering the world. He had found his place in the global fashion scene, but it was still the soul of his designs that set him apart. True style, true success, had come from within. Kofi's rise to global recognition was nothing short of spectacular. His designs had captivated the world, and collaborations with international fashion houses had flooded in. Luca Giordano was his biggest supporter, guiding him through the intricacies of global fashion while respecting Kofi's roots. The mix of traditional African designs and modern, bold styling had become his trademark. His Ankara fabrics, once reserved for local markets and events, were now draped on the world's most influential runways. But with all this success came an undeniable pressure. Kofi found himself torn between staying true to his roots and meeting the ever-demanding expectations of the fashion elite. The invitations to showcase his collection at prestigious fashion weeks in Paris, Milan, and New York were tempting, but Kofi couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. In a quiet moment at his studio, he stood before a large mirror, examining the garments he had crafted, the colors, the patterns, the textures. They were undeniably his, yet somehow they felt disconnected from the deeper meaning he had once felt. His designs had always been about more than fashion. They were about history, culture, and identity. But now, in the swirl of global attention, he began to wonder if he had lost the very essence of what made his work unique. As he pondered these thoughts, Chinonso entered the room, her presence a welcome comfort amidst the storm of his growing doubts. "You look lost in thought," she remarked, her tone gentle yet knowing. Kofi sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know anymore, Chinonso. Everything has changed so fast. I started this journey to create something authentic, something that would represent who I am and where I come from. But now, I don't know if I've lost that." Chinonso studied him for a moment, walking over to the rack of clothes hanging in the studio. She pulled out a jacket Kofi had designed just days earlier, its bright yellow and red colors vibrant against the dim lights of the shop. The embroidery along the sleeves, intricate and delicate, told a story of ancient African warriors. "You haven't lost anything," Chinonso said, holding the jacket up for Kofi to see. "Look at this. It's still you. You've always told the story of your people through your work. Don't let anyone tell you what your story should be." Kofi met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "But they're all expecting something new, something different. Every season, every show, it's the same pressure. The world wants me to fit into a box. I don't know if I can keep up with that." "Then don't," Chinonso replied, her voice firm. "Don't let anyone box you in. You're not here to meet expectations. You're here to set the standard. You've always done that. Your story is yours to tell, and no one can take that away from you." Kofi's heart swelled with emotion. He had always known that his designs were more than just clothes. They were a representation of his identity, of his heritage. But in the face of fame and fortune, he had started to lose sight of that. Chinonso had reminded him of his purpose, of the power his creations held to inspire, educate, and uplift. The following weeks were a turning point for Kofi. He decided to take a step back from the fast-paced world of international fashion and focus on what mattered most: his art, his culture, and his community. He began to design with even more intent, creating pieces that spoke to the struggles and triumphs of his ancestors, woven with a deep respect for the history that shaped him. As he continued to develop his new collection, Kofi found himself reconnecting with the roots of his craft. He visited villages to learn about ancient weaving techniques, sought inspiration from the stories passed down through generations, and infused his designs with the spirit of the land. His new pieces were bold and meaningful, each one telling a story of strength, resilience, and hope. The launch of his latest collection was nothing short of extraordinary. He returned to Lagos, where it all began, to showcase his work in a grand fashion show at Eco Hotel and Suites, a venue that had once been beyond his wildest dreams. The event was a celebration of African culture, with music, dance, and art intertwined with the fashion that Kofi had come to represent. The audience, made up of fashion moguls, international buyers, and prominent figures from across the world, was mesmerized by the depth and authenticity of Kofi's work. Each garment that walked down the runway told a story, a tribute to African heritage, to the artisans who had passed down their craft, and to the generations that had fought for their place in history. When Kofi took the stage to speak at the end of the show, the room fell silent. The applause had been deafening, but there was an air of anticipation as the crowd waited for him to address them. "I used to think that fashion was about what we wear," Kofi began, his voice calm yet powerful. "But it's so much more than that. Fashion is a reflection of who we are, of where we come from. It's a tool for telling our stories, for expressing our identity, and for me, it will always be about representing Africa, about honoring my roots." The crowd erupted into applause once again, but this time, Kofi didn't bask in it. Instead, he looked out over the sea of faces, each one reflecting a piece of the world he had touched. He had stayed true to himself, to his heritage, and, in doing so, he had changed the course of fashion forever. As the night ended, Luca Giordano approached him, a proud smile on his face. "You've done it, Kofi. The world is yours, but you've never lost yourself in it. Your work is unlike anything I've ever seen. You're not just a designer. You're a movement." Kofi nodded, his heart full. "Thank you, Luca. But the true movement is in the people. It's in the stories we tell, the culture we honor, and the pride we wear." As Kofi left the stage that night, surrounded by the laughter and joy of the celebration, he realized that he had indeed created something timeless. His work was not just about clothing. It was a living, breathing testament to his journey, to his people, and to the power of staying true to one's self. True style, he had learned, wasn't defined by the trends of the world. It was defined by the soul of the designer, the heart behind the art. And Kofi's soul was now more than just his. It was a gift to the world. It was a bright Sunday morning in Lagos when Kofi sat quietly in his studio, watching the soft sunlight filter through the windows. The world seemed to be moving in fast forward around him, but Kofi was still, lost in his thoughts. His journey had taken him to places he had never imagined: fashion shows in Paris, meetings with influential moguls, and international recognition. Yet, the feeling that remained with him was simple. His heart was still firmly planted on Elegba Street. It was here that his story had begun, here where he had learned the true meaning of style. This was home. But it wasn't just about the clothes anymore. Kofi knew that his work had become a symbol of something far greater, something that transcended fabric and stitches. He had become a voice for his people, an ambassador for African culture, and a pioneer in an industry that often overlooked authenticity in favor of trends. Yet, despite the accolades and wealth, his heart beat for the community that had nurtured him. The streets of Lagos that had once seemed so distant and unreachable, now his source of endless inspiration. That morning, as he sat quietly, he reflected on the message he wanted to leave behind. What would his legacy be? Would he simply be remembered as the designer who brought African fashion to the world? Or would he be known for something deeper? He had often said that fashion was about more than just clothing. It was a reflection of identity, culture, and history. Now he realized that it was also about empowerment. And it wasn't enough to create beautiful clothes. He needed to create opportunities. He needed to invest in the future, in the young designers who had the same passion for African heritage that he once had. A plan began to form in his mind. Weeks later, Kofi held an open house at his studio, an event not for buyers or fashion critics, but for the next generation of designers. He invited young, aspiring tailors and artists from all over Lagos to come and learn from him. He offered free workshops, mentoring sessions, and even scholarships for those who wanted to study design. The event was a success beyond his wildest dreams, with eager young talents showcasing their ideas, bursting with energy and creativity. One young woman, Amara, caught his attention. She was an orphan from a nearby village living in one of the poorest parts of Lagos. She had no formal education in design but had a natural talent for sewing and embroidery. Her work spoke volumes. It wasn't the flashiest or most intricate, but it was raw and real. Just like the Kofi's early designs, when she presented her pieces to him, Kofi saw in her the same fire that had once burned in his heart. "Your work is powerful, Amara," Kofi said, his eyes filled with admiration. "But remember, style isn't just about what you make. It's about why you make it. You have to create with purpose." Amara looked up at him, her eyes wide with hope. "I've always dreamed of doing something that means something. I want to tell my story through my designs. I want to show the world that Africa is more than just a place. It's a culture, a spirit." Kofi smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Then you're on the right path." He handed her a card. "Come work with me. Let me help you tell that story." Over the following months, Kofi worked closely with Amara, teaching her not just the technical aspects of design, but also the values that had guided him through his own journey: authenticity, resilience, and the importance of community. Kofi's decision to mentor young talent wasn't just about passing on his skills, it was about creating a movement. He had gone from the misfit on Elegba Street to an internationally recognized designer, and now he was determined to pay it forward. His legacy wasn't in the clothes he made, it was in the lives he changed and the opportunities he created for others. As the years passed, Kofi's influence only grew. His designs continued to be celebrated worldwide, but more importantly, his impact on the fashion industry and the African community could be seen in the rise of young designers, each one carrying forward the torch of African pride and authenticity. Elegba Street, once known for its hustle and struggle, became a beacon of creativity, a place where new ideas, rooted in tradition, could thrive. One evening, as Kofi sat in the front of his studio, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Luca, Giordano, called him. "Kofi." Luca's voice was warm but filled with excitement. "I've just been in a meeting with the United Nations. They want to honor you with a global award for your contributions to fashion and culture. They want to recognize how you've transformed the fashion industry, made it more inclusive, and put African heritage at the forefront. It's an incredible achievement." Kofi sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. A global award, a recognition from the United Nations. But as the congratulatory words rang in his ears, Kofi's mind wandered back to the streets of Lagos, to Elegba Street. He remembered the days of struggle, the years of dreaming and fighting. He thought of the young designers he mentored and the people who had supported him throughout his journey. "This award," Kofi said, his voice soft but resolute, "is not mine alone. It belongs to the people of Elegba Street, to the streets of Lagos, to the African spirit that has shaped me and my work. I will accept this honor, but I'll never forget where I came from." As the years went by, Kofi's tailoring house continued to thrive. His legacy lived on in every design, every young designer who walked through his door, and every person who wore his creations with pride. Elegba Street, once just a corner of Lagos, had become a symbol of resilience, of African pride, and of the power of staying true to one's roots. Kofi's story wasn't just about becoming a fashion icon. It was about understanding that true style came from within, that authenticity was more valuable than trends, and that success was not measured by wealth or fame, but by the impact one had on the world. And so, Kofi's legacy was etched into the fabric of history, not just in the fashion world, but in the hearts of every person who had ever dreamed, struggled, and risen to make their mark. Elegba Street would never be the same again.